Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here, and this is episode 361 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. I got the chance to sit down with Hunter McWaters from the Hunter's Quest in this episode. We discuss how Hunter got interested in Western hunting, along with the story of a cool horseback elk hunt he did in Wyoming during 2024. Now, Hunter lives in Virginia, so his tale actually may seem familiar to those of you from that part of the country who are interested in breaking into the Western hunting world. And like many people, Hunter was initially confused and overwhelmed by navigating the entire Western hunting draw process, but he did figure it out and has had some awesome hunting adventures since then. And like I said, we'll talk about that Wyoming hunt in particular in this episode. Before we get into that, I would greatly appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to complete a listener survey of the Big Game Hunting Podcast and provide some feedback about the show. What you like about it, what topics you want covered in the future, what guests you would like to have on the show, etc. It'll take you just a couple minutes to fill out the survey, and your responses will help me plan future episodes to help me give you what you want more of in the future. And as a special bonus, everyone who completes the survey will be entered in a random drawing for a $50 Cabela's gift card. One response per person, please. Link for the survey is in the show notes. Also, go to biggamehuntingpodcast.com/ebook, sign up there to get a free ebook I have written about some of my favorite hunting cartridges. When you sign up, you'll also start to receive the emails I send out every weekday. If you like the podcast, you will love those emails about hunting, shooting, ballistics, etc. So sign up at the link in the show notes. Okay, now let's dive into things with Hunter. Good morning, Hunter. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, like you and I were talking about, you and I met for like 2 minutes at the SHOT Show back in 2024, and we talked about a couple things, but it's one of those things that, man, those shows are always so freaking crazy. You talk to 1,000 people while you're there, so it's nice to have a chance to sit down and talk with you one-on-one for an extended time now.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me on. And I remember listening to your podcast, like, gosh, years ago before I even had a podcast. And I was like dreaming about, or I was planning on going. My first ever trip was a trip to Alaska. And I think it was you and Joseph Von Benedict, if I'm remembering correctly, talking about a moose hunt or something. I don't remember exactly which one, but man, you've been doing this for a while. So congrats.
Thanks, man. I started it in 2019, so I celebrated my 5-year anniversary last year.
Wow.
And Joseph is one of my good friends, one of the guests I've had on the show a couple times. I've had him on the show to talk about hunting moose in Alaska, and he also talked about a solo caribou hunt he did there.
I think I listened to both of those.
Okay, yeah. And I think we talked about those in 2020, 2021, thereabouts.
Sounds about right. That's kind of when I started. So
okay. All right. Well, so let's dive into that. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how and when you got started in this business.
Yeah. So my name is Hunter McWaters. That's my real name. I did not make that up. So I honestly feel like I was born to do this, man. Like just been obsessed with hunting since I was a little kid. Of course, my dad got me into it, waterfowl, and then I was a diehard whitetail bow hunter here. I'm from Virginia. But I did the math the other day, and like 86% of my life, I hunted probably more below sea level than above sea level. Like I hunted, beaver swamps, flooded timber for ducks and deer. And just where I lived was a super swampy kind of place in Southeast Virginia. But I always dreamed of getting into mountain hunting and elk and caribou were something I dreamed of, but really for some reason, like I always really dreamed of like Colorado mule deer. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. Just that was the thing that kind of got me excited. But anyway, let's see. I went through kind of a rough patch in my life, which we can go into more if you want to, but I think I've gone into it quite a bit so people can hear more about it if they want. But anyway, I was coming out of that, and I was my life was improving. I was kind of getting in shape and stuff, and decided, hey, let's try to give this Western hunting thing a look and see if I can do this. And so I started looking into applications and tags, and as many folks might have done before, I kind of realized, or I kind of started looking at it, and it was just so confusing, like just intimidating. Like, how do I apply for this stuff? How does this all work? And like all this stuff that doesn't make any sense if you've never heard it before. So, and it was completely foreign to me. I mean, here in Virginia, you buy your tag, you get 6 whitetail tags and you just buy it. So I started looking into it, and to be honest with you, I got intimidated and kind of was like, I don't know. I kind of like put it on the back burner, although I was still dreaming of doing it. And then, providentially, I think it was a God thing. A friend of a friend kind of that I'd gone duck hunting with like maybe once or twice here in Virginia, sent me a random Facebook or Instagram message that really changed my life. He's like, hey man, I'm going on this walk-in DIY caribou hunt in East Central Alaska. You want to go? And I was just like, yes. And so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And he's former Navy Special Warfare, like super fit. And I was like starting to get in shape, but not really there yet. And so at that point, I believe it was in like January or February, he asked me, and it was for the following August. So I had, most of that year, or, 3/4 of a year to just start learning and training. And that's when I came across your podcast and a bunch of others, and just started absorbing podcasts and YouTube videos. And because I'd never been even on a backpack trip, let alone a backpack hunt, let alone a mountain backpack hunt in Alaska. Like, it was just like, all the gear was new, the training was new, the species was new. It was like I started hunting all over again. And it was just a really cool, fun year of just learning and improving and getting in shape and having that goal, to really be shooting for. And so, yeah, I went on that trip, and it might sound cliche, but it really did. It changed my life, man. Like, just my existing love of hunting, and then mixing that with, total immersion for a week, in the backcountry, and the challenge, the physical, mental, even spiritual challenges of it. I was just like, hey, like, this is what I want to do. And, so I came back home, and before this, I had been working in professional media production for almost a decade at this point already. And I started the podcast right around, it was, I think 2020 it was either 2019 or 2020. We went on that trip. I always mix it up. But it was like right in the, height of COVID. So, we're working from home. I decided I'm going to start this podcast, just mainly for fun and like a side thing, and really to have an excuse to talk to guys who knew way more about Western hunting than me and learn from them and network. And then it started going really well, and I was having fun with it. And I got some work filming some hunts for some guys. Like, I got a job filming a hunt for Dan Staten at Elk Shape. I did some film work for Brian Call over at Gritty. And then I filmed my own hunt the following year, which was a Kodiak deer hunt that my wife surprised me with for Christmas, actually. And I was like, hey, I have the skills. Let me grab a camera and just, why not? I'm going to be this awesome place. YouTube had never really been part of my plan. I never really had like a grand plan, to be honest. Although I do think in the back of my head, like, it had always been a dream of mine to have, I think, a hunting show. But I'd always told myself, nah, that's too, how you have those big dreams and you talk yourself out of them because they seem too big. So anyway, filmed that hunt. It was pretty good. You can still watch it on my YouTube channel. It was the first thing I ever did. And we filled 3 tags. My buddy killed a really nice Boone and Crockett, actually, blacktail buck. I killed a nice one, not anywhere near as big as his, but and that kind of started opening up some more doors. I did some more work for Brian over at Gritty, and then kind of decided I wanted to go my own way, do my own thing, and continue with the podcast. And I was gonna just do, just the YouTube kind of thing. But by this time, man, YouTube was just getting it was super saturated. Not only just saturated, but a lot of really good stuff on there too. And I kind of was discouraged and didn't really know, how I was going to kind of get above the noise and everything and be able to convince companies and brands to actually support what I was doing. So then I did a podcast sort of randomly, honestly, with a guy who he's a little bit of a controversial figure, to be honest, but he's in the TV space and he's produced several shows and stuff like that. And he kind of opened up the possibility of, hey, why don't you do a show on sportsmen? And I had no idea how that worked. But he introduced me to some folks at the Sportsman Channel, Outdoor Sportsman's Group. And since I already had worked, like I said, I'd worked in the industry. I worked for a national television show as a cam op and then a producer for like 7 or 8 years. So it seemed like the only really barriers to entry for doing broadcast TV was financial, but then mainly just knowing how to produce a show and being able to do it in a financially viable way without having to like hire everything out. So I had the skills and the know-how to produce this TV show all by myself. And I did. I produced the first 2 seasons completely on my own, edited everything. And there's a lot more to it than just dropping a video on YouTube. Like there's broadcast standards and music cue sheets and run orders and different exposure limits and audio, standards. So there's a lot more to it, but that kind of gave me something tangible to go to brands with. Like, hey, yeah, I have 0 following on social and YouTube right now, but I'm going to be growing it. I do have this show. So it kind of gave me a little bit of instant legitimacy, and I was able to, pay for my airtime that first year from brands. And then the next year I like quadrupled my income when brands started to see, okay, this is legit. And then this year, I really focused a lot more heavily on YouTube and social and grew those a ton. And things have just been growing quickly and steadily. And, I feel like the Lord has blessed it, and I love it. I'm obsessed with it. And I feel like it's what I'm meant to do. So it's just been going really well, man. So I'm grateful, and it's been an awesome, awesome ride.
So what year did you initially get your first show or your show?
The show, okay, so season 2 just finished, and that would have been 24. So 23, season 1 aired, but I filmed that in, I guess it would be the fall of 22 I filmed, and then the first season released the fall of 23.
Mm-hmm. So you are initially from Virginia. You grew up hunting there. You had this desire to do other stuff. That hunt in Alaska, man, you went straight into the deep end with that. So that was your first ever quote unquote Western hunt then, right?
Yeah. First Western hunt, even really hadn't even done any like camping hunts. I did one truck camping hunt here in Virginia with my cousin for like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And then this was like, it was like trial by fire, man.
Yeah, so you hunted caribou in Alaska. I see on the shelves and on the wall behind you, I see some pronghorn back there. Yep. I see a lot of deer, and I see, looks like 2 elk behind you. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's 3 antelope over there. There's a deer slam over there, 2 elk, a bear, a roebuck, and a chamois from Spain, and then my caribou's over there.
Okay, very good. So you and I talked about this before we started recording. You were saying that last year, so we're recording this in 25, so 2024, you went on a horseback elk hunt in Wyoming. Tell us a little bit about that hunt.
Yeah, so, as a guy from the East Coast, I think, like I said, I definitely am a deer guy. I do like elk too, but as a guy from the East Coast, a horseback elk hunt is kind of like aspirational, probably maybe same from guys from Texas a little bit. Just it just seems like one of those iconic kind of things to do, like just leading that pack train out with a big bull on there. So, So I'd planned, well, let's see. So it's kind of interesting because I'd met my friend David Merrill he has a brand called Bow Spider. He was literally the first guy I ever met at any like event that I went to with the podcast, which was a total archery challenge in Pennsylvania. Super nervous, didn't know anybody, and just kind of sheepishly walking around. I finally started talking to him and his wife, and they were super nice to me. And so we stayed friends over the years. Every time I go to a show or something, I would, go say hi to them and hang out. And he came on the podcast. And so he's a Wyoming native. And, a couple years ago, he's like, yeah, man, whenever you're, ready to hunt elk in Wyoming, let me know. And hopefully we can get something together. So, I planned on my first elk hunt being a Wyoming general tag because that was the advice that actually Dan Staton had given me. And at that point, you could draw it on 2 or 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
By this point, it took me 4 points to draw it. So it was a little bit delayed. And it was my second elk hunt because for somehow my first elk hunt ever, I drew this tag behind me, this bull. I mean, he's not like a monster or anything, but a good bull. But it was a like 1% draw premium New Mexico muzzleloader tag. And that was just like, for my first elk hunt, is like just wild to draw that. But anyway, fast forward, I decided this year or last year, I'm going to burn my elk points in Wyoming and just do a general tag. And so I called my buddy David and he was like, yeah, man, come on, let's do it. We had to move some stuff around. But he was willing to have me and he's got horses. He owns a couple horses. We also borrowed 1 or 2 from a friend of his, but, don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to knock guided hunts or outfitters. Like they're great. There's a time and a place for them. I personally like doing things more DIY. I have found that in guided situations, I very quickly just kind of like revert to a very like follower mentality. Like I just like, okay, whatever. I'm just kind of following the guy.
I'm along for the ride. I'm not paying attention. Yeah,
exactly. And it's really hard for me to like not do that in a guided hunt situation. So I really don't do guided stuff unless it's like I have to. Like, I've been on a couple guided aoudad hunts because they make you go with a guide because they have a legal or a minimum, like a 29-inch minimum, and they're really hard to field judge aoudad. But so anyway, I knew I wanted to do a horseback elk hunt, but I knew I didn't want to do an outfitted hunt because I didn't want to just be like you said, along for the ride. And I wanted to be in there working with the horses, helping out, like being a really active participant, not like, okay, go sit over there. We'll take care of the horses. We'll call you when we're ready. You know what I mean? Like, and so this was a perfect opportunity for that. So yeah, we went out and we planned the hunt. And you want me just to go into the whole story?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go straight into it. So we set the stage. You wanted to do this elk hunt on horseback. That's something a lot of people aspire to, especially people that don't live out west like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily on horseback, though a lot of people do, but elk are one of those species. So you got the tag, you got a friend that has horses. He's going to help you out, give you the experience you want. Tell us the rest.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think, the horses, I think for me, from my perspective, there's a misconception that like horses make it easier. And they don't. The only thing that they make easier is the pack out. Like they will carry meat, but they actually make things much harder. They're a ton of work. So, which I didn't quite realize the amount of work, to be honest. But that's why I'm glad I had this experience, and why, I'd recommend to guys that are Western hunting, like build those relationships. Even if it's like on Instagram or whatever, like I've had Instagram friends help me out with stuff too. Like, it's a great community. Hunters seem to be a great community. So, But yeah, just because I'd built this relationship with this guy, not because like, oh, like I know he's going to take me elk hunting one day. Like that was not my goal. I just was, being friends with this guy, and it panned out to this. So yeah, we showed up at his house, and he had just come back from a trip to Alaska. Like literally, we got to his house the same time he did from his trip to Alaska.
Huh.
Yeah. So like, none of the gear was like ready to go. Like we had to go pick up horses. We had to get side by sides. And so, and it's just one of those things where like stuff is going wrong from the beginning. We had on this trip, I think 3 separate flat tires along this trip. Yeah. And luckily my cameraman that I'm working with is like super handy. He can like fix things and patch tires, and like he's an awesome kid. So, but we get in, finally get everything together. We get to we find a base camp location, and the other thing is too, I'm producing a show, a film about this, so locations matter and stuff like that. So we pull up to the first spot, and it's like it looks like a tailgate parking lot for like the Daytona 500. Like there's like Trump flags and side by sides and trailers everywhere, and I'm like, dude, we cannot do that. Like we're not camping here. We can't. So he's like, okay, whatever. And we find another spot. Found a really good, more secluded spot by a creek, and started setting up the wall tent. Now I didn't realize how sick my friend David was, and he was kind of keeping it quiet. Like he mentioned he was sick, but so we're setting up the wall tent, and like at one point I look over, and he's like, he took a breather for a second, and he's sitting in like a camp chair, and he's just like nodding out, like in the middle of the day. And I'm like, oh man. And then at one point he was trying to like rig up the rain, like the cooking area, like the rain fly on top of the wall tent, like in the front, to like the pole, and like he was wrapping the rope around just the tarp and not even around the frame, and like just incoherently doing stuff. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, go sit down. Let me do that. So he was sick. And then like the next morning he was like barfing out the window on the way to the hunting spot. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez. Poor guy.
And we gave him like, what's that stuff that Rogan was talking about that cures COVID? It's like a horse antibiotic or something.
Ivermectin.
Yeah. We were pumping him with ivermectin, and that actually seemed to work. But anyway, he was sick. And so he wanted to, and also he knew how much work it would require for us to really go back in deep on the horses. So he's like, let's hunt this low stuff here by camp and just see. It's produced for me before in the past. So the first 2 days we hunted some lower stuff, and it was unseasonably warm, first of all. Second of all, the first day we saw 7 grizzly bears.
Oh my gosh. Jeez.
Yeah. And the next day, and we heard 1 elk bugle that night. And so we decided, hey, it was too dark. We never got eyes on them, but we decided, hey, we have to at least try to go in here the next morning to see if we can find that bull again. And we went in, never saw the bull. We did see an additional 3 wolves and I think 8 other hunters.
Gosh, man.
Yeah. And so we're walking kind of back from the morning hunt. And you know that point in a hunt where it's like the timing is such that like if you're going to have time to make a move, it has to be now, or you got to stay where you're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you reach that like decision point. And as we're walking back after seeing those other guys and the wolves and stuff, I was like, my mind was made up. I was like, we are going back, even if I have to drag David back there, because he's so sick that he's kind of reluctant. He doesn't really want to go back there. He wasn't saying that, but we could tell. And, and again, it's not a knock on him. He was just real sick. And, so we go back, I make a big breakfast for the guys, and I'm like, guys, now's the time. We have to make a move. We have to go back. My cameraman was just on the board. He was like, yeah, we have to go. Like, and so we kind of had to do a little convincing, and we did convince him. And then, so at that point it just becomes, all right, pack stuff up as quick as we can, because we're trying to make it back in before dark and get camp set up and everything. So we're throwing stuff together, trying to weigh out pannier boxes and get everything we need, feed the horses, water the horses, shuttle vehicle. It's a long process. And then we have probably close to 6-hour ride once we got everything ready. And we get back in there, like just before dark, we find a nice campsite by a creek. And this was miles past the last human contact that we had. And we're feeling good. We saw some deer on the way in. We saw some elk on the way in. We saw some bighorn sheep on the way in, which was cool. And we're back in there deep. And so we're feeling good. Like it just started to look elky, and I'm feeling like this is looking pretty good. So that night we, had a little freeze dried dinner, and we looked at Onyx, got our camp set up right just before dark, and kind of made a plan. I was pulled up my Onyx, and there was a nice looking drainage we could glass into about a mile up the trail. And that was kind of our plan, just to hike up the trail and see what was in that drainage. And started snowing in the middle of the night, and like a wet snow. And we woke up and it was much colder, like a little skiff of snow on the ground and spitting kind of wet snow. And we started hiking in the dark, and we make it just about a mile from camp, and the sun starts to peak up. There's a low ceiling of clouds, but it's starting to get a little lighter. And we heard bugles start ripping off, like 4 of them all around us. And we're like, oh, heck yeah, dude. Like I wasn't even expecting them to be bugling still, but this is like mid-October.
Mid-October, okay. I was about to ask you. All right.
Yeah. And so we were looking around, it was pretty thick in there. It was still pretty dark. And finally we located one bull just across the canyon from us, about 450 yards or so. And he was bugling, and David's like, man, do you want to like wait and try to find like a really big bull, or do you want to just like shoot a good bull? I was like, I just want to shoot a good bull, man. Like this, general tag, second elk hunt ever. I'm not going to be super picky. I'm not going to, so, and that's just me too. Like I don't get super wrapped up in numbers. If it's a mature animal, like I don't pass up too many good opportunities on mature animals. Now I think as I progress as a hunter, I might get a little more picky maybe, but if it gets me excited and it's a mature animal, like I'm not too picky. So, so yeah, I was like, let's do it, man. So we finally got everything set up, got to get the camera guy set up and everything. And folks that are listening, like you can go to my Instagram right now. You can watch, I made a reel of like the whole kill sequence. And it's pretty good. I think the cover photo is like me holding a empty cartridge case, next to the elk. So check that one out. But, yeah, so first shot, he was quartered away slightly, and it hit him center mass. I think some people might say it was a little far back, but it was a good shot, center mass, like solid hit. He jerked up and then like kind of was like, whoa, looking around and started walking downhill. And then I kind of was able to thread the needle and squeeze one in. And second shot hit him really like pretty much perfect right behind the shoulder. At this point, he starts to stumble. And of course, I got lots of Monday morning quarterbacks on the comment section, well, wasted all this meat. Blah, blah. But when you're in the backcountry and you're hunting elk, you don't stop shooting until they're on the ground. And you want them on the ground in eyesight. And I've seen quote unquote dead elk dropped on the ground and then get up and run up across a mountain. So I've seen really well hit elk just go for miles that are like dumping blood. So I think most experienced elk hunters will tell you don't stop shooting until they're down.
I mean, a saying I've heard is you shoot them until they're in the dirt, and then you shoot them again once they're down.
My muzzleloader elk, man, I hit him frontal at 80 yards, the 50 cal muzzleloader, like drilled him frontal. He runs. You guys can watch this video on YouTube too. It's amazing. I step on a twig about 50 yards from him. He jumps up. I hit him, again, full speed on the run. He drops. I had to put a third one in him on the ground still. I mean, they're incredibly tough, man. So,
So let's back up a second. Tell me again how far your shot was on this Wyoming elk.
So I'm at 375 yards.
Okay.
And
I'm
shooting a Weatherby Range XP with I modified it, had a MDT Hunt 26 chassis, MDT Sky Pod, bipod, Barnes 180 grain, Vortex. This one I had a suppressor on there, a Silencer Central Banish 30, and a Loophole Optics VX6 HD 4-24 by 52.
And was this a 300 Win Mag?
300 Win Mag, the Lord's caliber.
A man after my own heart. There you go.
Yep.
And so were you shooting prone on it?
I was. We were able to find a spot I could get prone. I will do everything in my power to shoot prone, even if it's uncomfortable, if I can.
And so you said you shot him twice. Did both of those shots exit?
Good question. I don't really know, to be honest with you.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really look. Oh, I found one of them.
Oh, really?
In the backside hide.
All right.
Yes. Yep. I found one of them in the backside hide. So I'm not sure about the other ones, though.
Yeah, so it sounds like your first shot, you said, was quartering away. You hit him a little behind the shoulder, but since he was quartering away, that bullet angled forward. Yeah. Probably found that one like in the offside shoulder after going through all that mess.
Yeah.
And
it might have been a little far back. I mean, it wasn't like, I think it was like a fatal shot. It was just not like ideal. Like it was maybe 5-6 inches back, but not like a gut shot or anything.
Yeah, sounds like probably liver and one lung with that one then.
Yeah, I would say so. And like I said, he was quartered a little bit away. Second shot was pretty money. And then third shot. And then, so he's stumbling around. And I was like, I'm just going to end this now. So I put it right at the base of his neck. And he dropped dead. And so, it was awesome, man. It was a great, pretty much picture perfect. Like a little struggle in the beginning, little hard work, and then it just went off perfect.
I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what do you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com. That's BLUEHOST.com to start now.
And so now you're pretty far back in there. You took the horses in several miles, set up camp, and then do I understand right that you walked a couple miles out from camp, and that's when you ended up seeing that elk in there?
Yeah, it was only about a mile and a half from where we had walked from our spike camp, but we were 13-ish miles back from the trailhead. I mean, we were on a trail, but like from
where you parked your truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, man, 13-mile pack out with horses is one thing, and it's a nightmare doing that, carrying that elk out on your back.
Yeah, that's too much. That's why the horses were valuable, man, for sure. And so, we hiked over there, and we were able to get the horse. So me and my cameraman and David go over there. We find the elk. David goes back to get 3 horses, I believe, and then I start cutting the elk up, and we're doing our pictures and all that stuff too, and I think I surprised David a little bit because by the time he got back, I had the thing completely cut up, and he was like, "Well, okay." Like I was expecting to have to come up here and do this for you, but I've cut up my fair share of animals, and I mean it's the same as a deer; it's just way bigger. So anyway, we got him cut up, and we were able to get the horses right to him, and went back to camp. Of course, then you got to hang the meat because you're in grizzly country, and so it's a ton of work, man. I mean, horses are a lot of work, and killing an elk is a lot of work. It's just, I mean, every quarter is like heavy.
Yeah.
So, but it was great, man. It was a great hunt.
Yeah, one elk quarter weighs about as much as like all the meat you'll get off of a medium-sized whitetail.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if you like never go to the gym and you don't have like any like strength built up, like you will have a very hard time picking up an elk quarter. You might not even be able to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. It's awkwardly shaped and it's not light either. So sounds like your rifle and that Barnes ammo worked well for you, and you made a couple of acceptable shots. Maybe a acceptable one, a good one, and a really good one on it. But that's how it all works out, right?
For sure, man.
And he didn't go far, which is the main thing. And you were able to get like you said, horses are a pain in the rear to deal with out there, and everything about them. But man, you're able to, with all your horses and everything out there, once you got that elk back to camp, was it just a matter of then next day you pack up the entire camp and you take everything to include the elk out in one trip?
Yeah, so we actually stayed another full day to hunt for my friend David, and we knew that we could come out of there with 2 elk, but that it was going to be on the iffy, not iffy, but it would have been like we would be carrying meat as well as the horses, and it would be a little bit sketch because it was like the trail was not great. Like we almost had at one point, and one of the horses was pretty green too. So anyway, we hunted for another day. The snow came in. We saw a bunch of elk, and it was just beautiful back there. There was nobody else back there. And so the next day, my friend David, we got on another elk, like bedded, I think 275, 300 yards, about the same size as my bull. And, he put nothing in the chamber, but put the crosshairs on him and he's like, just counting coup, man. Like, I could kill this elk easily, but he's just not my bull. And it would have made things quite a bit more difficult. So he decided to pass on that one. And he actually did fill his tag the next day back at his low spot, which is pretty cool. But yeah, because the weather that had came in had pushed elk into his low spot.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. So at that point, we're just enjoying hiking around, hunting, and then I think it was the next morning. Yeah, we woke up and ate some breakfast, packed up camp, got my meat loaded, and started the pack out. And I always like to get at some point of a hunt, get completely alone and just kind of like process, especially towards the end of a hunt. So I let those guys get ahead of me for like the last couple miles of the hike and just kind of went at my own pace and just I like to just kind of process and just get completely alone for a minute because I think a lot of guys get that on hunts. For me, even when I'm quote unquote solo, I usually have a camera guy with me. So it's good to get a little bit of complete quiet and solitude, especially towards the end of a hunt, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting what you were saying about the weather earlier, about how when you went out there, it was unseasonably warm.
Yep.
Seemed like it was kind of tough going, but man, it changed once the weather changed.
For sure.
You got up higher, it was colder, and then it sounded like there was some weather coming in. Early October last year, I was hunting in northern Colorado, and similar deal, unseasonably warm out there. I mean, it was getting up into the 60s and the 70s during the day down there. And I had 2 friends that hunted Wyoming earlier in the month like that, and they struggled due to the weather as well. And it sounds like things did eventually change with the weather, and it made the situation a whole lot more different once you got that cold weather and some snow and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know what it would have been like back in there if it had still been warm and sunny. I feel like we still would have seen more elk because there was just more elk there.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta believe that weather, pushed some elk out from back in the wilderness. And it might have been a factor in them, bugling so much in mid-October because they were going off pretty good. So yeah, I think the weather definitely helped us out, and that was another part of our calculations of going back in there, is because we knew not only were we running out of time for a big mission, but we were worried that if we waited an extra day, we might have a hard time getting back in there with the weather. And plus it was midweek, so that's always a good time to get back in somewhere because most of your, weekend warriors are not going to be back there. So everything just worked out pretty perfect.
So you got your horseback elk hunt under your belt now. What, if any, lessons did you learn from this, or things would you have done differently if you had to do it again?
Good question. Okay, well, if we want to talk about lessons I learned, the big lesson I learned on this one was after I killed my elk, there was a few pieces of gear that had been left back at our base camp, our wall tent.
Okay.
Including, but not limited to, my cameraman's rain gear.
Ooh, man.
And weather was coming in, and we had like a 6-8 hour ride the next day in what we thought was probably going to be rain or wet snow, and pretty cold. So that in that situation, rain gear is like essential.
Yeah.
So looking back, we had I think my friend David had an extra duster, or we could have like put a tarp on him or something if it came to it. But he's 22. He loves adventure. He's like, I'll ride back. Like, he's good on horses. He's like, I'll ride back to the camp and come back and do it and get other stuff we need too while I'm there. And we, I let him do it. And we didn't have a good plan. So he went off by himself on a horse. He did have a emergency communication device, but we didn't have a good communication plan. We didn't tell him, hey, when you get to base camp, drop us a text. We didn't have any like backup contingencies. We just didn't think it and plan it through enough. And he just kind of went. Mm-hmm. And me and my friend David, we were, glassing, and we were freaking out. We were just so worried about, I was like, I can't believe I let this kid go. Like, we're in grizzly country. He's alone. He also, for some reason, went on the most green horse that we had. I was like, playing through scenarios in my head. Like, he could have gotten bucked off the horse, hit his head. He's laying there. Like, and we're like, if he's not back by like 9 o'clock, like, we have to go after him. Like, we can't, just hang around camp and what if he's hurt and then we wake up the next day and he's dead because we didn't go out and look for him or something, or we're just freaking out going through all these scenarios. And it turns out he did have a grizzly encounter on his way back almost at dark. He rounded a corner and a grizzly looked at him, stood up on all fours, and then thank God decided to go off in the other direction. But I'll tell you, man, like, when we got back, because ultimately this guy's life is my responsibility in some ways, not completely, but in some ways it is. And I hired him, I brought him back there. He's a young guy. I should not have let him go, probably, or if I did, at least have a much better communication plan. So if you got to split up, make sure you have your communication and your like backup plans ready to go, and don't split up unless you have to. And so that was the biggest lesson I learned. So yeah, when we came back down to camp, like, we were just so worried. And like, when we saw his headlamp in camp, we were like, like, I was so relieved. And I like ran to camp and like hugged him, and I was like, what's going on? I was so happy, man.
I've been worried sick about you.
Yeah, I felt like his mom though. But like, I mean, that's the kind of thing that can just ruin your life. I mean, like, can you imagine having a young guy's death on your conscience because you made a stupid decision? And I'm ultimately the leader on these trips, and so that made me really think about that a little bit.
Yeah, it just goes to show that these are fun trips, and you're going out there, you're working, but you're also doing it because it's fun. But at the same time, there is also an element of danger to it. It's not super dangerous or anything like that, but I mean, it can be, and especially if you get careless.
It wouldn't be any fun if there wasn't a little bit of risk.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, the weather can be a risk. The horses are a risk. Wildlife encounters, like with the grizzly bear, like, they're a risk. And I mean, people are messing around with guns and knives and stuff out there, right? Things can happen. Absolutely. And so yeah, I mean, it's good to kind of step back and consider those things and be like, okay, next time we do this, we're gonna have a better plan for it, and we're gonna make.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but like, even like like being in a place like the tundra in Alaska, and like not similar. I had a situation this year where like there's 3 of us, way back in the tundra, and you're back there. I mean, everything looks the same. There's no landmarks. It's easy to get kind of turned around, and like, there's a lot. It seems like a lot of times guys are like, "Oh yeah, I'll go over here and glass this for a second. You stay here and we'll meet." And it sounds like a great idea and super easy, but like something as basic as that can turn into a very bad situation very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even like if I'm somewhere like that, like Alaska, like in the tundra where like things can get real serious real quick. Like I have a rule, like to stay in eye shot. Like if you're going to leave my eyesight, you at least like look at me and confirm like, "Hey, I'm going." Or something like, because anything can happen. Stuff can get bad, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that was a really cool hunt. Glad things worked out with you for it. Now you got 2 elk under your belt. You got a rifle elk hunt in Wyoming, and then you got your New Mexico muzzleloader elk. What is the future holding for you specifically in 2025?
Yeah, man. It's going to be a great year. I'm blessed to be able to continue doing this. And in April, I'm going to go over. I have a buddy named Joe Edlington. He has a really big YouTube channel called J.E. Wilds.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he's probably the most well-known hunter in New Zealand. Definitely. He definitely is. He's like the Pedro Ampuero of New Zealand, I'd say. And so, yeah, he invited me over. We're going to go over there and hunt stag. Probably they should be roaring still a little bit. And then if we have time, he's got a amazing connection with the helicopter, Heli Rural. It's kind of hard to say, Heli Rural. And so he's got like unlimited fly time with them. And so if we got time, hopefully we'll go up and look for some tar as well. But he was like, "What do you want to hunt?" And like, I was like, "Dude, I don't really care, honestly, like species wise, like just going over there and experiencing and hanging out with you and collaborating, it'll be cool." So the timing fit best for doing stag and then, hopefully some tar after. So that's going to be cool. And then, let's see, August, I'm going back to Alaska, probably my last caribou hunt for a while. I've been kind of on a caribou kick lately just because it was kind of how I got started, and caribou opportunity is getting less and less, and Alaska's getting harder and harder to get good opportunity in just because of demand. But through Joseph Von Benedict, actually, I got linked up with a good air transporter finally, and had to book this hunt like 2 years ago. But flying with Toke Air out of Toke and doing a caribou hunt later in the season. I'm hoping to find a hard-horned bull. That's what I really want, is a hard-horned one. I got a velvet bull, and like I said, hopefully I can hold out for a good one, because that, like I said, it might be my last caribou hunt for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then August, September, I'm going to do a open sight muzzleloader deer hunt in Utah, which every year I have like one hunt that I seem to be like looking forward to the most of all. And like I start e-scouting in like February, like, and for whatever reason, this year it's that hunt. Like I love deer. I think the challenge of hunting them with a muzzleloader is going to be fun. Open sight muzzleloader, and that time of year, I've heard they're less pressured, still bachelored up a little bit. Good weather, so I'm looking forward to that. October, I planned a really cool collaboration hunt with my show and Ducks Unlimited. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I grew up duck hunting, and my dad's pretty involved with DU on the East Coast here, and DU wants to kind of get the story out to more folks that, wetland conservation is wildlife conservation. I mean, if you're conserving wetlands, it's not just for the ducks and geese. Like, all wildlife benefits from that. So they really want to kind of, dip their toe a little more into the big game space. And so I worked with my buddy Taylor over there, who is a DU rep over on the East Coast here, and we're going to team up and do a combo hunt where we're going to shoot ducks in the morning and then go shoot pronghorn antelope during the day in Wyoming. That's going to be a real fun hunt. November, I'm torn right now between going out to Oregon and doing blacktail again, or if I draw Montana general deer or a combo, I might do that. I'm not sure yet. But either way, like November is like deer month for me. Like that's, some guys are all about September and elk. November is my thing, and whether it's blacktail, mule deer, or even if I have to, a whitetail. I'm going to be hunting deer in November. And then December, you might appreciate this. I actually somehow found a hookup in Texas for it's private because everything in Texas is private, but DIY, meaning I have free reign of the place for a mule deer hunt in Southwest Texas, which, as you may know, finding opportunity to hunt mule deer in the desert without a guide is very hard to find. And I've talked to like friends who are like big time hunt consultants, and they're like, oh, I don't know anything. But I did find a connection to do that. So I don't think it's like world class deer hunting or anything, but there's deer there, and I love the desert that time of year, and I think it's going to be fun just to have a ranch and have a week to just do whatever I want, kind of.
That's really cool. Yeah, Texas is an odd duck in many ways. You're probably aware, and most of the listeners probably aware, not much, there is some, but there's very little public land in the state, and there's a lot of private land. And some of those places you pay big bucks to go hunt whatever they have there, but that's nice that you're able to work something out where you're able to have an unguided hunt on this private land.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find that. And like I said, I don't think it's like if it was world-class deer hunting, it wouldn't be there. Like this wouldn't be like an option probably, but I know there are deer there, and there's also aoudad on the property, so maybe I could work out something if it's not happening on the deer or whatever. But yeah, and the weird thing about Texas is like even the state land, you can't hunt. It's like leased out to people, like with like 50-year leases and stuff, at least in the area I'm going to be. So, but it's near an area where I've aoudad hunted a couple times, and it's really cool country. Like I said, I grew up in marshy, swampy stuff where like, there's just decaying vegetation and mud everywhere. So when I go to the desert, like, I don't know, it just feels like I'm like walking through like a display in a botanical garden or something, or like a Zen garden. Like it just feels like clean and like pretty, and like there's all these cool rocks everywhere and geological features. So I love the desert that time of year. So I'm looking forward to that one too.
Yeah, very good. Well, sounds like you're going to have a heck of a year coming up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. I'm blessed to be able to keep planning really cool adventures and bringing out good content, man.
Okay. Well, where can people go to learn more about you and consume some of this content you're talking about with your show and your podcast? Yeah, I mean, the best place to go is my YouTube channel. You can just search on there, The Hunter's Quest. There is another guy who has a channel called A Hunter's Quest, but mine's The Hunter's Quest because it's not just my quest, it's our quest collectively as hunters. That's kind of the idea behind it. Plus it's my name, so it's kind of a play on words. But yeah, go to my YouTube channel. Right on the top, you'll see hunt films. And, on here I got Texas Free Range Aoudad, DIY Alaska. That's the one where we hunted the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, killed 2 bulls, and floated out on pack rafts. Ooh, amazing adventure. Yeah, I got that elk hunt I was talking about where the elk jumps up 50 yards or 20 yards in front of me. A bunch of cool stuff on there. And I even do some content. Like when I went to Spain, I did a couple of videos just about like the cultural side and like the food and the people in addition to the hunt films, because I just had all this cool content. And then, like I did a video just about the pack rafting section of the pack raft hunt. So there's like more content on there. And if you guys go there, please subscribe. But then obviously, the Instagram, same thing at The Hunter's Quest. And my podcast not been going as long as yours, but I got about 200 episodes with some really, really good names and some really good conversations on there, so people can check that out. Same thing, The Hunter's Quest. Okay, very, very good. Now, we're going to wrap with this question, and it's the question I'm asking every single guest on the podcast this year. You must choose one. Either you hunt for the rest of your life with one single cartridge, and if you choose a single cartridge, you can use any bullet in it, or you must choose one bullet type, and then you can use that bullet type in any cartridge. What's your choice? Yeah, so I thought about it. I'm going to go with the same bullet type and be able to pick my cartridge because, there's just so many different cartridges and new ones coming out and different applications. I am a 300 Win Mag guy, but I also hunted this year 300 PRC, which I really liked.
I shot Pedro's 6.5 PRC in Europe for like smaller stuff, and it was a sweet gun. So I would like to have that kind of flexibility, but I think I'll shoot a copper monolithic bullet for the rest of my life, man. That's just, I think lead core bullets you can have great success with, and I know people who will swear by them too. But for me, the penetration, the knockdown power, the weight retention, I've just had great success with the copper monolithic bullet. So I'd be fine with shooting one of those the rest of my life.
So is there a specific brand that you're leaning towards within the copper stuff, like the Barnes you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, Barnes makes great stuff. Browning actually has some, and Winchester have some solid copper options right now that are solid. So I think there's, I don't, I'm not too picky as far as the bullet itself goes. I just like that solid copper.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, that's the thing about the copper, and every company makes their own little spin on it. But just within the Barnes line, they make factory ammo from 223 Remington all the way up to and including 500 nitro. So you could kill basically anything on this planet with one, to include an elephant or a Cape Buffalo in Africa, if that ever struck you. So okay, that's a good way of doing it. I like the way that you think.
Yeah. Well, I just felt like I last thing on there is I felt like I did try out like the the Hornady ELDX. I think it's a great bullet. Like I said, I know guys that swear by it, but my experience with it was less penetration, less blood trail, and more meat loss. So it just seemed to like just destroy like a whole shoulder and just make it all jelly, and then still have very little blood trail and not get great penetration. That was my experience with it. That's anecdotal. I was only on like one whitetail that I'm kind of basing that off of, but I just have had much better success with the copper. So
yeah, I mean, so copper bullets in general penetrate wonderful, and if that bullet exits, then you almost always get a much more significant blood trail out of it. Okay, well, good deal. Well, Hunter, thanks a lot for joining us on the show today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I put a link in the show notes to Hunter's Instagram page. Once you go there, go to his reels, and you'll see a cover photo of him holding a cartridge. Click on that, and you can see the kill shot from the elk hunt we talked about in this episode. I've also put a link in the show notes to a video on his YouTube channel from his New Mexico elk hunt that we talked about he did with the muzzleloader. That one has a great start to it. I have also put links in the show notes to episode 130 and 162 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Those were the two interviews with Joseph Von Benedict. Hunter and I briefly mentioned at the beginning, talking about Joseph's solo caribou hunt and his moose hunt. Some of those moose hunts were in Alaska. Those are both great episodes. Be sure to have a listen to them if you have not already done so. Now, also don't forget to fill out the survey and get entered in the drawing for the Cabela's gift card, and get my free ebook on the best hunting calibers. Sign up for my email list at the same time at the other link in the show notes. So that'll do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to the BigGameHuntingBlog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.